Okay, there might be a better idea than beans, but I'm gonna use beans. But there's actually a problem with using beans, and that's that there are beans in it.
You see, beans don't fit very well inside of a soap dispenser.
And this realization really sent me down the rabbit hole that made me spend days researching different soap dispensers to try and find one that would work for beans. There's a difference between home soap dispensers and commercial soap dispensers, wall-mounted versus freestanding soap dispensers, electronic versus manual, ones that foam, ones that spray, ones that have multiple colors, ones that make noises, and even a soap dispenser that looks like a nose. But which one of these is best for beans? It turns out that none of these would really work for beans. The holes inside are just too small to allow the beans to pass through. I even got down the track of looking up commercial condiment dispensers that I could pump the beans out. I figured if it works for chunky relish, it should work for chunky beans. And that's when I found this. This is a totally 3D printable soap dispenser that has a hole that I could scale up to allow for the beans to pass through. With a 3D printer, I can make things whatever size I want. This is not the actual size of a living Triceratops skull. However, I was able to scale it down. I can do the opposite with a beans dispenser to make it big enough for beans to pass through. And I was all ready to get it printed when I noticed this line here. Avoid using thick gel soaps as they may clog the pump. This is not a standard liquid soap. This is gonna require some more complicated engineering. The problem is the hole that you see the soap coming out of isn't the limiting factor into how thick of a liquid the soap pump can dispense. They're internal mechanisms which only open a very small amount, allowing the liquids to pass through. And it was this realization that made me think a soap pump isn't gonna work. It's just impossible to fight gravity. But what if we choose to work with gravity? But most of these soap pumps work by squeezing the liquid through a very small opening, almost like milking a cow. It's not gonna work for beans. And I was really trying to avoid this, but I realized if I was gonna make this thing work, I was gonna have to make it myself. Pieces here. The main mechanism works with a rotary valve. When you rotate it, it drops beans down into the funnel, then down through the chute onto your hand. I tried 3D printing an axle for the valve to rotate on, but it just wasn't strong enough. It was too brittle and too tough to get through. So I decided the best thing to use was actually wooden skewers. The problem is I need to attach this valve to the skewer so that it doesn't rotate freely. And I have to do all of that while it is inside of this other piece. What my plan is to take this soldering iron and jam it in here so that I actually melt the plastic of the valve to the skewer. And that way when I spin the skewer, the valve will rotate as well. You might be asking, what about the fumes as I melt this plastic? So that is all together and it rotates. Now I just need to do the same thing for the handle. All right, I've got the pieces all connected together and I found a very useful support. So I'm just gonna let this sit for a while and see if everything holds. The parts have all connected exactly like I wanted. And you can see that the crank isn't exactly centered, but I'm never gonna be turning this very fast, so it shouldn't be much of an issue. Let's put all the pieces together and see how it works.
Next, I made sure to wash and dry all of the pieces to avoid any small bits of plastic in the beans. And once it was all clean, it was time to fill it up with beans. Luckily, there were only minor leaks as the beans poured down into the dispenser. And on my first test, only 2 or 3 beans came out. Not nearly enough to wash my hands with. So I tried removing some of the beans to reduce the amount of weight on the rotary valve. And it still didn't work. The skewer was no longer connected to the valve at all. This meant that I had to go 3D print my backup plan. And after removing all of the supports, it was ready to fill up with beans.
So this beans dispenser is absolutely incredible. It just uses gravity like I had originally intended and has no mechanical parts. The top does screw on and off, and as you can see, it says soap on the side, so everybody will know that it's soap.
But does a container with a hole in the top count as a dispenser?
Is a container with a hole a dispenser?
It can be, depending on how it's used.
There we go. So it is a dispenser, and this is how we're going to dispense beans. So you might be wondering, is this food safe? But it's really not a worry, because this is not food. This is a hygiene product.